What a beautiful day. I was sitting the last round, slightly intoxicated. The fragrance from the flower, so beautiful. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the combination between the two of the plum tree in my monastery. In Japan, there are different significance of different, right? I mean, every culture has that, but Japan is very particular. So there's different symbolism, right, around different trees and flowers, and so of course everybody associates Japan with cherry, right? And of course it's a big thing in Japan, but cherry actually in kind of Buddhist context is more represents the impermanence, right? It's that if you have lived in Japan for a few seasons, you know it's very clear that cherry blossoms comes very, they open very quick, right? And they're in this full blossom for a few days and then they go. So there's many, many stories about that, right? My teacher liked to quote this. There was a founder of Jodo Shinshu school, Shinran Shonin. He also lived probably like, I don't know, 800 years ago or something. And he was a young boy who, maybe his parents died when he was like 7 or something. And he decided, he needs to become a monk because he was confronted with the reality of impermanence very head on, right? Strongly. It was right in his face. So he traveled to Kyoto to become a monk and asked the abbot there. He arrived late in the night, maybe after dusk, right? He arrived and he asked, I want to become a monk in this monastery, which, in that way of, in that doctrine or that way of looking at things, it's important to be able to receive those precepts because it's kind of like making this commitment, right, to liberation, that even, no matter what, it's right, it carries through, even if you die, like if you take on the view of many lifetimes, right, as they do in this culture. So he said, I want to become a monk. And then the abbot said, he saw the boy was serious about it. So he said, all right, tomorrow morning I'll call my attendants and we'll make the ceremony. And Shinran Shonin, who was just a young boy at the time, he composed at the spot this little poem that basically said, the mind believes in tomorrow's cherry blossoms. The storm comes at night and takes them all away. And kind of hearing that, the abbot was like, all right, let's do it tonight. He really heard him. So, cherry blossoms are easily picked and easily destroyed, right? Like they don't last. So that's kind of one sort of, you may say, teaching from a fruiting tree. But another one is actually plum, right? Plum, not like a Western plum like we have, the big purple plums, or you know what I mean, right? The prunes, that we made prunes from. Japanese plums are kind of very small and green, and maybe they turn yellow when they're really ripe, but you can't eat them. Like, they're very sour, right? So you make umeboshi, you pickle them, or you make they make alcohol too from them. But plums, they flower in winter, like in the very, very late winter, right? So it can be like even in February you could see them bloom. And in Japan, the plum symbolizes patience, right? And patience, it's not just like any good old patience of like, you're stuck in traffic and it's in Mahayana Buddhism there are like 6 perfections, right? And one of the perfections is patience. So plum, is patience because it blooms, and those, it often blooms when it still snows, right? So you have those pink flowers that are covered in snow, and they last for months sometimes, like it well into March. Um, and in the temple that my teacher used to live, there was this very old plum, few hundred years old, and it was kind of like half laying, and there was ferns growing out of it, and very crooked and old, but every spring it was coming, with the flowers. And in that context, right, in this environment, that means something also, very different. It's not just like flower, right? Like the context is that from November it starts to be cold, right? It starts to be getting really cold, and then in December it can already snow, and and in monastery there's no heating anywhere. There's no source of warmth, right? There's once in a 5 days you can take a hot bath, but otherwise in the tap there's only like really cold water, right? So you don't have access to anything warm, basically. And those are long months. December, January, February, right? And you can have frost bites and all whatnot, and it's challenging, right? It's challenging. Um, so when you see this plum blooming, which is like this very first kind of very early messenger of spring that kind of brings hope after those so many days of brutal cold, and it's not like you go back to a warm room, and it's cold at night. It's kind of like being homeless in some way, right? Like you try to pile up different, maybe blankets, and sometimes I remember those nights when you wake up in the middle of the night, and things are heavy from the pressure from above, but then gravity kind of pushes you to the foot on below. But you wake up and you're kind of shivering, and you just don't even know where's up or where's down, right? Because like everything's like you try to have as much piled up as possible, but it's still, it can be still cold. So whenever the plum blooms, and it's definitely not yet warm, right? In April retreat, we very often had ice on the pond in the morning, right? Um, so it takes some time for it to warm up, but still, whenever the plum starts to bloom, there's something that's really like it's almost like you see the light at the end of the tunnel. This hope comes back. Oh, actually, there is something different in winter at some point, right? Um, so it's it feels like hope. It feels like, but also it is this symbol of patience, right? Of kind of enduring whatever, not enduring in a way like you know like being present, like blooming in the face of challenges and difficulty, right? It's symbolized this spirit of uh, not letting, the harshness of the environment kind of break something, right? It's that um, calm endurance, right? Calm patience. And that's certainly a quality that is comes in handy on this whole process, right? um, and that's I not necessarily think it's not worth the style of practice, this kind of trying to put so much harsh conditions. I don't think in 21st century that appeals to much people, or is that necessary. But what it was actually um, helping kind of cultivate in some way was that quality, right? You're you know it's almost like, in a certain way, you just simply need to drop resistance to whatever is happening. Because if you would keep resisting, if you would keep having this timeline in mind of like, oh my god, let me count it, there's still 120 days of below freezing, that I have to endure, then it's like, it might, once the mind starts like spinning wheels, it might be that, right? It's okay, I'm leaving. That's just not possible. But strangely, there's so much more possible than we think is possible, right, within our capacities. And again, I don't think like testing our health, or unless some people just like some challenges of that kind and go to the wilderness. Some people enjoy that too, right? So it's not like a torture necessarily, but for most of people, I don't think it's necessary. But cultivating that um, attitude of actually, when you have to drop the timeline, you have to just let go of that framework and simply make friends with what is, no matter what it is, right? It can be hard, but um, so another little paper. This time it's not a drawing. I'll read out few lines. I won't read it all. From saying of Zen Master Kyung Ho. That's at least how they call it. I honestly think that I remember at some point finding that the source of it was in China rather than in Korea. But anyway, those are good pointing, so it doesn't matter who necessarily wrote them down. So just read a few lines here. First is, don't wish for perfect health. In that one thing there is greed. Instead, make good medicine from the suffering of sickness. So in a way, sickness also has that quality. Like, it's, if you would choose, right? Like, nobody would choose to be sick, right? It's it has like, it doesn't feel great, but yet, that we can make a medicine even from the suffering of sickness, right? We can cultivate that, uh, I guess, surrender, right, or acceptance, like, not kind of like just arguing with what is, or constantly wishing for it to be gone, but just staying with whatever is arising, and through that, that helps us access this way of being that just doesn't push and pull on things constantly, right? Which is that's true nature, right? Like the true nature of, let's say, the reality, right, doesn't push and pull in the same way that the kind of ego, separate self, push and pull, right? Um, so number two, don't hope for a life without problems. An easy life results in judgmental and lazy mind. Instead, accept the anxieties of the difficulties of this life. Um, yeah. So I guess it's all very a uh, similar way, pointing here. Number 3, don't expect your practice to be always clear of obstacles. Without hindrances, the mind that seeks liberation may be burned out. Instead, attain deliverance in disturbances. And that's also this important point, right? That every single obstacle that we encounter and we go through in our practice, digested becomes wisdom, right? So of course, everybody would like to have it as easy as possible, right? As quick as possible, and we feel like that's like an ideal, right? Oh, maybe like I'll just ask one question, it'll all be clear, and that's great, right? Sure. I mean, if it happens like that for someone, awesome. But the wisdom that is gained while going through all those obstacles is actually something that is our treasure, and it is kind of helping us to be of more benefit in the world in some way. So don't expect to practice hard and not experience the shadow. Hard practice that evades the unknown makes for a weak commitment. Instead, help hard practice by befriending every demon. Yeah. Number 5, don't expect to finish doing something easily. If you happen to acquire something easily, the will is made weaker. Instead, try again and again to complete what you're doing. There's a few other points about, but I'll just go to the end. Be equal to every hindrance. Seekers after truth are trained in adversity when they are confronted by a hindrance that they can't overcome. Then, cutting free, their treasure is great. So in a certain way, even if it's not like, we're not trying to go out there and seek difficulty or seek, more suffering, right? But whenever, something like that just is part of our experience, we can see that equally as a gift, as we see the moments of clarity and bliss and all that. Because the mind that for many of us, the beginning of the journey is by I want to suffer less, right? I want to suffer less. That's why I'm here. That's why the whole project of spirituality is to kind of let me get out of this human experience in some way. And that's understandable. But when the time passes, and like approach to spirituality matures a little bit, then we see that the teaching is in every single thing, and that commitment to actually not shy away from what's uncomfortable is precisely the quickest pathway to truth. So even if our initial impulse might be, I just want the way out of that whole thing, the only way out is through, right? It's not by escaping anything. It's not by avoidance. It's not by haggling with what is. It's simply in that spirit of quiet flowering in the harshness of the winter, right? In that being able to be present with whatever is going on. And it's to the degree that we can, right? Like I think Adyashanti had this really um, stark way to put it, right? He was saying, you know, let's say if someone comes to him and say like, oh, I'm all about truth, you know, it's that's the most important thing for me. And he would say, you know, okay, so let's say you're 20 years old. If you would know that your trajectory will be that exactly of a Jesus, right? Of Jesus Christ, who by 33 was crucified because, you know, he lived what he realized. Would you still want it, right? Um, and you know, and also it's not like to try to like, you know, like make the math right now and kind of like judge ourselves if it's not like a resounding yes, right? um, because, you know, even right, even Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, right, when he was praying, he would say, Father, if it's only possible, take this chalice from my mouth, right? uh, but then, you know, he ended with, but thy will be done, not mine. So so of course, you know, everybody has their challenges and moments of struggle. And of course, there's naturally part of us that, you know, wish for that not to be the case. But there's also, you know, there's also wisdom, right, that within us that knows that something that is arising, you know, right? Even if we, let's say, leave the retreat, like it's not like we'll leave it in severe Utah and be, you know, run away free from it, right? It's something that is influencing our life this way or another. So if it is coming within our experience, to the degree that we can be able to be present to the best of our ability, which is always, you know, never will be perfect, right? It's there's this Catholic monk. I listened to his talk, and he had this way of saying it, which was, I think it was beautiful. He said, you know, Jesus wasn't half divine and half human. He was fully divine, fully human, right? So in the same way, it's like, you know, those both of those movements will be present within us, right? They kind of like get me out of here. How do I just solve the problem of what's happening? But then, you know, the more we find that perfection of patience, you can say, or this attitude of surrender and allowing, we can also, you know, be more and more in touch with simply the true nature, right? The nature of our mind, which does not take any side, doesn't have any preference for left or right, and, you know, hot and cold and this and that, right? It's just the raw experience is just that. It's just pure potentiality unfolding. So those two come together, right? Like they are both part of being human being, right? Dogen had this really beautiful. It might be one of his most famous quotes, but it goes something more or less like, We attain enlightenment like a moon reflected in the water. The moon doesn't get wet, nor is the water broken. Although its light is bright and great, it reflects even in a puddle an inch wide. The whole moon and all the stars are reflected in a single dewdrop on the grass. So it's, moon is always, right, the true nature in the Zen poetry. And you can say that, the water is kind of our humanity, our kind of this relative expression. So in the same way, like the meeting of our intention and our process of realization, so our relative and absolute nature, it's kind of, our human flaws don't diminish the true nature, right? They don't cover the true nature in the slightest, right? So the moon doesn't get wet, and nor is the water broken, right? So just that absolute truth is not shattering or not like completely altering our humanity either. But even even the smallest little droplet, right? It reflects the whole depth of the limitless sky, right? Just the millions of light years of depth. So we kind of can, to the degree we can get in touch with that untouched nature, right? The unborn, untouched, unharmed by anything ever, right? Just nothing can touch it in a way. But at the same time, there's our human relative expression that, can have hard time at sometimes, right? And would rather have this cup taken away from its lips. And also, also honoring that and not thinking it's something wrong necessarily. It's just another appearance. It's just another thing unfolding, right? Just as the sadness, just as the bliss or anything that arises. So we can, try to like find that kind of spirit of plum tree, growing in the wintry place where, surely the snow falls on the very, very delicate pink petals, right? Very, very soft, very delicate. Sometimes like the snow falls, then it's kind of covered in ice, right? But still, this kind of just spirit of allowing and gentle blossoming is not dominated by any of that. Right, I just saw that nothing of the talk got recorded, so it's a perfect ending to the patient's talk. All right.